Hi everybody, this is the end of this course. This is chapter 10, Prevention and Security Policies. And I'm very happy that we are approaching the end of this, and I hope that you have gained the proper knowledge throughout this course from chapter 1 to chapter 10. Now, as you know, that the course is Introduction to Network Security, that we cover 10 chapters. We began discussing chapter 1, which is Introduction to Security. Then we talked about chapter 2, Information Security. Then we moved on to more topics about different security models and key concepts and terminologies. We talked about that in chapter 3. Then we discussed cryptography and encryption standards in chapter 4. We moved on to the network basics in chapter 5. We talked about different network architecture, different topologies and protocols that operate at the different OSI layers. Then we moved on to chapter 6. We talked about network standards and protocols associated to security. Then we moved on to chapter 7. We discussed the defense of depth security model, and layer 1 specifically we talked about devices such as the firewall and the different type of firewalls that exist. And then we moved into another device that operates at layer 2 and 3 of the defense of depth security model, and we talked about intrusion detection system. Then in the previous chapter 9, we talked about security threats and the different avenues that or the attack could happen, and the steps toward establishing the attacks and the type of attacks that exist. Finally, this is chapter 10, and chapter 10 is about prevention and security policies. That has two main objectives, which is the first one is to understand that there are best practices that exist for implementing the network security that must be taken into consideration. And then we could talk also about preventive measures that could be established also to ensure that if those are being adopted, then we will have a better secure environment. Now, in moving forward in this chapter, we understand that in order for us to secure systems effectively, we must have a structured approach in doing that. We must examine, of course, that what are the systems that are being intended function, what are their functions, their capabilities, in order for us to determine, of course, what process and application that should be implemented in the system. Now, for best business practices, okay, we should remove. And this is the rule of thumb, is that we must remove all different components that we don't require, or we must disable everything that we don't require in the operation, and also we must do the proper installation of the patches, the hot fixes, and the different settings that should be applied to protect and secure our systems. So there are considered to be best business practices in terms of security or network security. Therefore, we need to establish security baselines that allows the system to run safely and securely. Now, the baseline means that a standard. So we need to set a standard. That's the minimum. And this is the minimum that we should adhere to in order for us to meet the security requirements. And otherwise, we will be deviating from the standard. Deviating from the standard, this could be a threat to our environment. Now, the first topic is that best business or best practices for network security. Now, as we have discussed throughout this course, we thought about different security issues, and we talked about the security policies that should exist in order to increase the security of the network. So, keeping in mind, as an IT management or IT administration point of view, we definitely need to have some kind of rules and procedures in place in order to secure secure our environment, we must have a security policy in place, written, that dictates how the network is being secured, and how to handle the different security issues, and how to handle the intrusion to the system, and to maneuver around that, utilizing baseline concepts, baseline requirements, and that will ensure that we don't deviate from those requirements. So that's why we discuss it here. While policies can both complex and cumbersome, or basic and straightforward, it's often simple aspects that prove to be very useful. Now, like for example, if we implement for example, an antivirus or update system, this will facilitate or will help us to make sure that the viruses are being prevented from entering into the infrastructure. We ensure that by having a proper update system, that all the software have been updated for patches and updates for any security holes that could exist in them. Now, this is all this is about central administration, and this is part of the security policy that should be implemented. So in general, policies and ideally automatic enforcement tools help reduce the obvious holes in the system security, so that no one can penetrate into them, and the focus will be, of course, in discussing complex issues. So the issue is definitely to have a very secure policy in place that is written and that is dictated and that is passed all over the enterprise, and this should be understood by everybody in the organization in order for us to move forward with this. Now, there are certain typical part of the enterprise network security policy that should be taken into consideration, and the first one that we can talk about is the firewalls. This should be at all public-private network transit points. So anything when there is a transition, when there is a transition from the internal network to the external network, when there is they call it a transit point. Whenever there is a transit point between an internal network to the external network, we must deploy firewalls. Firewalls is to protect the internal network from hackers and intruders from the outside or the internet or the public network. Now, of course, the second topic here is that we need to have version controlled and centrally deployed firewall rule sets. So definitely we need to be able to have the best, the latest software, the latest version of the firewall. We need also to make sure that the firewall rule set has been implemented correctly. And those are or should be administered centrally and deployed in order to ensure that they can be updated and modified at any point. Now, external resources usually placed in a dual firewall, keeping in mind that we must have DMZ zone. And when we talk about the internet or the external network, we definitely need to isolate our internal network from the external network by having something in between. They call it the DMZ or demilitarized zone. That and we should implement a firewall from the internal network side and another firewall from the external network side, and in this way we have multiple layer of security at the perimeter level or at the firewall level. So external resources should be placed in dual firewalls, DMZ protected networks. Now, all network hosts lock down unneeded network ports, turned off unneeded services. It's very important to go and verify that every operating system that we run have the services that we don't need should be disabled, and the ports that we don't need should be closed, and to make sure that only the necessary ports and services are up and running. Then we need to look at the network hosts includes centrally managed antivirus software. So we need to implement and deploy a centralized antivirus server in order to ensure that this host can protect our platform our users by updating their virus definition file in their workstation, and the same thing at the server side. Now we need to make sure that all network hosts utilize central security updates. Also, it has to be centralized automatic updates if necessary. Now, secure central authentication such as Radius, with window, Kerberos, Active Directory could be implemented, and specifically it depends on the operating system that is being deployed. If we are talking about Windows Server 2008 or R2, then we talk about definitely utilization of Active Directory, utilization of Kerberos in terms of the for the authentication purposes. Now, Radius, if we talk about dial-up connectivity and access from the remote side. Now, centrally managed user management with password policy, we need to have some kind of password policy to ensure that the passwords are very strict, very complex, and we have to have rules for making sure that the changes is happening every certain period of time, and in order for us to secure the password area. Now, proactive network scanning for new hosts out of dated systems. We should continue monitor to make sure that network scanning for any new host out of dated system and so on should be continuously running. This is to make sure that our resources are up to date. Network monitoring for suspicious behavior. Also, we have to make sure that we have implemented good network monitoring systems for any suspicious behavior. Could be also we could apply different intrusion detection also system to ensure that the data or the packets that are being collected are of proper pattern, and they are not of suspicious pattern that could be a cause of threat. We could have an incident response mechanism. We could have policies, manuals, automated system in order to ensure that there are some kind of response team available to ensure that there is or to overcome the security threat. Now, the above list, of course, represent some key items of the policy, but the policy could also entails more available, more advanced feature. It is also important to balance factors such as company size, how much risk we can anticipate or we can allow, the cost of the business impacted if there was any security threat. All this has to be taken into consideration, and in order for us to generate a very strong policy that prevent our system from being threatened. The next topic we will talk about is that what are the preventive measures that could be possibly implemented in our environment in order to ensure that we have a secure environment. This is the following list. There is a list of here I see that there is a list of 6 items that being added to show you that there are different areas that could be preventive measures that establish around them in order to ensure that there is less attacks or no attacks on computers and network. One of them, of course, the password selection. The password selection is one of the critical activities that often neglected, and this should be taken into consideration. The proper password selection has to be put there. It should be a baseline for the password selection, and this should be enforced on a regular basis. Now, operating system and network operating system hardening. Now, this is very important to harden the operating system at both the workstation level and the network level, and even at the other level of the devices, like the firewall has also to be hardened with the latest update of the operating system in order to ensure that there are no holes in the system, and they are less susceptible to any breakage or damage. Now, updating, including, of course, hotfix, service packs, and patches should be taken into consideration. Network hardening, proper control over network access must be established, including network security. Application hardening at the application layer is that to ensure that the application has been properly implementing the latest patches or updates. We could implement also what we call the group policies and security templates, and this could be done at the different type of the operating system. For example, Microsoft Word, we can implement group policy object, and the group policy object can be associated or linked to the organizational units and the domain, and it can be enforced at the group level. In other words, in this case, we don't need to do it at the user by user level. We can implement it at the Active Directory or domain level. So establishing security policies at the organization level with respect to network access, operating system specifics like a group policy object, and their implementation with domain and different organizational units. Also, we could implement some kind of security templates in order for us to streamline the system administration process. By this, we have reached the end of this course. Our course was Introduction to Network and Introduction to Network Security, TEL 369. And as I mentioned, we talked about different topics of security, and I hope that those concepts have been have reached you, and you are able to understand them. And I'm looking forward other courses in the near future, and thank you very much for listening to me, and I wish you all the best in your other courses and career. Thank you.